Good evening, everyone. Welcome to LFC Transfer Room. I'm here tonight, joined by Carter and Dan, the American one, to discuss the latest news around Liverpool Football Club. We are going to chat injuries once again. We're going to try and chat the about Xabi Alonso and the newest interest from Bayern Munich following the latest developments in Germany over the weekend. And then we're going to try and discuss a bit about the technical director job from the summer onwards. We now see that West Ham is thinking of, rather, Team Steinen is thinking of leaving West Ham in the summer, and that would work out because we need someone in their position. And I believe he'd be quite a good fit. But we're going to discuss that a bit later. If you're here tonight, welcome for thank you for dropping by, and make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and of course leave your comments. We'd love to have everyone here involved. Happy holidays to Paul. Welcome to the stream. And Yeah, okay. I'm just gonna ask everyone. Carter, how are you doing tonight, mate?
Yeah, I'm all good. Just relaxing. Had some KFC earlier and just sort of just chilling for the rest of the day.
I was a chef tonight as well. I cooked for like 3 people family, so that's no one said thank you yet. I'm grateful. Yeah, Dan, how about you, mate?
Oh, it's my anniversary, so I might be hopping off here to have a late brunch here. But other than that, pretty good. Just enjoying my day off. It's nice, like lively weather up here.
Is it better now? I know that a few weeks ago you were facing a snowstorm, something like that.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, it's nice weather. It's still cold, but it's like at least nice outside.
Great. Okay. Now, I think that's enough for everyone to kind of settle in. Once again, make sure to please drop your comments. We'd love to have you part of this conversation. Let us know whatever. Let us know your thoughts on your on any specific topic that we're going to discuss. Up until then, though, I'm going to start with you, Carter, and I'm going to ask you your opinion about the latest injuries, or maybe the latest developments or updates in terms of injuries. Now, to kind of get everyone an idea of what's happening, we now know Diogo Jota might be out for around 2 months. Um, so that's going to be quite a blow. He's probably going to be back. He'll probably get like the last few game weeks of the season. We'll have to see about that. It's still nothing official. We might see more tomorrow from Jurgen. Jones is definitely out of the EFL Cup, so he's not going to be back for a few weeks. Trent is only going to be back a few weeks after that. Allison is still not fit, so he'll probably not play in the EFL Cup. Probably wouldn't have either, anyways. I mean, Soboslai might be back. Nunez and Salah are probably fit. Now, that took a whole minute to list. So, not necessarily most encouraging news heading into a week where we have to play Luton on Wednesday, and then 3 days later we have the EFL Cup. So, Carter, your thoughts on the injuries and how that's going to affect the rest of the week for us?
I think it's obviously not great. You'd rather have all your best players, and I'd rather Klopp win as many trophies this year as possible. But I think the way you can almost look at it is Gakpo's now going to have it looks like he's going to have a proper run in the team, because I think obviously now Nunez might be managed his minutes a bit more, just because obviously they want him to play as soon as possible, but I don't think he'll be able to go and play 90 minutes or back to back to backs. So I think you'll start to see Gakpo get a sort of sustained run in the team, and this is the opportunity for other players to show that they are the standard and that they can step up and they get minutes. Like Gravenberch is probably going to play a decent amount of football now. Elliott's going to get an opportunity to play a decent amount of football. And although it's not the most sort of stable, and if you were Gravenberch, you'd rather play with the normal 10 plus yourself instead of maybe having Harvey Elliott on the right wing and not having Gakpo or not having Nunez or Salah. But it's opportunities for other players to come and show that they are at the level to start. And it's also good for the next manager and next sporting director to be able to look at these players and say they played 6 or 7 games in a row for Liverpool in this period, and either they cut it or they didn't cut it. And then we're able to make more decisions on some of the players in the squad.
Yeah, I think Paul made a comment about it yesterday as well. He said that injuries, of course, when you look at them first time, they might sound like not the most encouraging news, but then maybe it gives some of the other players a chance to maybe play some consistent minutes, get some consistent minutes, and then obviously we can see that Gravenberch took that chance pretty well against Brentford. He was great. It was probably his best performance in Liverpool shirt, debatable, but still, great to have him. And obviously, I think he was also going to be a great player for us. I think his criticism was a bit unfair, so I think he'll do great. Dan, your thoughts on these latest developments in terms of injuries, and how do you think that's going to impact the rest of the week for us?
You're on mute.
Mihai muted me because of my clacking. I should have muted my microphone thing. Thank you, Carter. I think that it really depends. So we don't know anything about Nunez right now. So if we're taking the Nunez situation as similar to Chelsea, like when he had that foot injury for Arsenal, then he's probably on the bench for Luton and then probably starts the final. Salah, again, we haven't seen anything official. Both him and Nunez have been very active on social media, which if you think they have a serious injury, they probably wouldn't be as active as they've been. So I expect that if they're not starting on Wednesday, that they're probably on the bench, and that's probably just a case by case scenario. With Jota, I mean, like they said, with the report we've seen from Portugal, as it said, 2 months. He came with an knee injury. We just don't know. It could be 2 months, but he could be back in like 6 weeks or like 4 weeks, if he's like really speedy recovery. And he's done that before where he's come back fast from injury. With Curtis, again, we will know more by Tuesday. Um, so really it comes down to, how do we survive these next 2 games? Because after that, we actually get a nice spread out before we start the Europa League games. So if we can manage Luton and Chelsea, our next game isn't, I think, until the following Sunday. So we have Luton Wednesday, Chelsea Sunday, and then our next game is Forest
Uh,
away
we do
that
have
Friday.
Southampton in the FA
Oh yeah,
Cup.
so Southampton, but Southampton you can just play like a mixed youth team. It's like you can play like your McConnells, your Bobby Clarks, your Kate Gordons. You essentially just put in a Simicast, a Kwanzaa, Kelleher or Kumas or whoever you have as your, or Adrian even. So it's just about managing really these next 2 games. And then after that, Soboslai should be coming back. Trent should be coming back for City. And mostly it's just like, how do we get these players who are on the road to recovery just back for City and then kind of figure out a timeline for Jones and Jota. Like it's not great. It's not ideal, but we do have like players like Cody Gakpo who starts for the Netherlands and can score goals. If he has to play for like 2 games while Nunez is on the bench, it's not a bad option. If Ryan Gravenberch has to come and step up, again, not a bad option. Harvey Elliott, again, not a bad option. Again, even Bobby Clark or McConnell, if they have to come in and like, give you 45 or give you 30, it's not ideal again, but you could do that in like some of these home games. Maybe not Luton, but you could definitely do that in the FA Cup and in other games after that.
Yeah, I think the toughest thing about these injuries now is that you can't have that. Some of them, maybe lots of them, are actually going to be long term injuries. So that kind of means that they're not going to be available for the matches that we now have in a relatively short term coming up, because we're going to play the EFL Cup final obviously on Sunday, and then City is not that far away either. So that we know that Jota is most likely going to miss City, and Jones will probably not be back for that either. So that creates two problems now. First of all, how competitive of a team of a first 11 we can play against City at Anfield, and then that really means from now on we need to avoid injuries, because anymore will kind of mean that playing on in what 3 competitions we'll have left. I don't see how we're gonna do that greatly. So Alan, welcome on stream. Good to have you, mate.
Running a little late.
Wanted to ask you about the injuries that we have. Obviously, now we've seen that the updates on Diogo Jota, on Jones, on Allison, Trent, Soboslai, and everyone else. Because I'm not going to list them once again. It takes like a minute. So, yeah, your thoughts on these updates and how you think we're going to manage without them for the next 1 or 2 weeks.
Well, I think it's going to be really tough. If I'm being honest, the list just seems to be getting bigger and bigger every day, or every match you seem to see one seems to pull up with something. How are we going to cope? I think we're quite lucky that we got a really good squad. So I think if we can still put out a decent 11, it then just falls what's behind that. And that just, although I think a good bit of quality, it's the inexperience that comes with that. So if you think back when Trent goes out, a few weeks ago, when you think, okay, we're putting in, this Connor Bradley, you go, okay, we've heard things about him, but he's come in, past all of us. How many of us would have said, oh yeah, he's going to be playing as well as he has done? So because he's done so well, we haven't really missed the Trent injury. And I think if we did have a start at 11 that I think we can put out, I think we can still be quite competitive. City aside, we could probably beat all the teams we used to play with an 11 that we can put out still with the fit players. It just then falls down to, I think one advantage we've had this season is if the game hasn't been going well, you're seeing the stats. Liverpool score league goals because we're bringing on quality players off the bench. We're fresh. The opposition's been run over a little bit. That's my only concern going forward. If we're playing against a team, let's look at our next game with Luton, for example. It's going to be physical. It's going to be, back and forth. If we don't get a couple of goals lead on them and we're needing to go to the bench to say, right, guys, come on, help us out a little bit, all of a sudden, what quality on the bench that could come and help us out a little bit? Outside of the final, we've got Southampton home in the FA Cup. Again, similar thing. If we can get a few goals up, the team we've got could easily cope with it. Forest, I think, is the next game away from home. Again, I think we could go with the 11 we've got. It's then when we go to City. But by that time, let's see who's back. Will Jones be back? Who knows? Will Szoboszlai be back? Who knows? But it is a worry. We can't, as you said then, we can't afford any more. But if you look at the 11 we could put out, we still got our best defence. If you think as Connor Bradley is a better defender than Trent potentially, so we still probably got the best defence you could put out. Midfield wise, obviously we've been hurt a little bit, and we still got Mo Salah up front, so he can win us games by himself. But it's a lot of pressure to put on one man.
Yeah, I think the only good news that we have now is that Nunez and Salah are probably going to be back even for Luton. I feel like they've been very active on social media, and that probably means that they are fine and they're at least going to be on the bench for the game against Luton, and then be obviously healthy for the EFL Cup final. Yeah, it is going to be pretty tough. I think what's also difficult now is not knowing necessarily the length of these injuries, because now we don't really have an accurate news necessarily on any of the players. So yeah, hopefully those few weeks for Trent are going to turn into days. Maybe, I don't know. We can only hope from now on. I do think that we do have some great youngsters coming in, and I think that it was the same with Trent when Klein got injured. I think that's how he kind of got into the squad, into the first 11 as well. So it could be an opportunity now, obviously, for someone like Bradley. Kwanzaa, we've seen a lot of this season as well. So I think the only problem I have though now is if we don't get any news on some of these players being injured for the City match, that's going to be maybe tougher. But that's probably a conversation to have for the next few weeks. So yeah, we can move forward now with the conversation. The next topic that we are going to discuss is Xabi Alonso. We've now seen that Bayern Munich are now 8 points away from Leverkusen in the Bundesliga. So now that means that Thomas Tuchel's job is going to be in jeopardy. Now, obviously, Bayern are not going to try and negotiate with Alonso now, but it's most likely that if Tuchel leaves his job, which is probably at this moment a matter of time, they will try and see if Alonso would be interested. Now, me personally, when I heard that, I felt like if Xabi Alonso seriously considers going to Bayern now, then I don't know if I want him for Liverpool. Mainly because going to a rival, like the following season after you've had a title challenge against them, I don't know how that feels, especially for the Leverkusen fans, and now obviously for Xabi to go toe to toe with Bayern and maybe get the title in this season against them, and then to just join them the next. I don't know how I feel about it. Now, personally, I feel like Liverpool now are a better job for Xabi Alonso. Maybe, obviously, I have my own bias, but I feel like coming to Liverpool now gives him a great opportunity to maintain the standards that Klopp you know got back for us, and he'd have a lot more backing from the fans. I think Liverpool as a fan base just doesn't compare to anything else on the planet. So, especially with a player like with a former player like Xabi Alonso, he'd have a great relationship with the fans. He'd have a lot more patience from the board and the fans than he'd have at Bayern. So I just don't see how at the moment you take the Bayern job over this Liverpool one. But obviously, we're here to have a conversation on the topic. So, Carter, what do you think? Do you think that Xabi Alonso would be interested? Do you think he'd take the job ahead of this Liverpool one?
I think he would be interested, but I think obviously the big sort of issue is if they sack Tuchel now, Alonso's not going to leave now. So it's like, do they put someone on 6 months, like sort of gardening leave, like have a little intern manager, which I couldn't see. Like, I don't think a top manager would go and do 6 months. So I think if they sack him now, it kind of makes it easier for us to get Alonso because we'll have more of a clean run. But also to your point of saying picking the team that you'd want, I think Bild reported that Kimmich wants to leave now. He's in the last, I think, 18 months of his contract. There's rumours every day saying Alphonso Davies to Real Madrid. Kane's older. There's issues with the defence of Eric Dyer starting over Matthias de Ligt because they think he's better than de Ligt. That's not looking good. They're playing a left back at right back at left wing back. Mazraoui from Ajax hasn't hit the ground running, and they've got no defensive midfielder. So I think he'd look at it and go, probably Kimmich and Alphonso Davies, two of the four players you'd most want to have in your squads, are leaving. And what is that super appealing? Like, it's not a job where you think he's going to succeed in Europe, probably. Like, we're a team where, although maybe Salah could leave, we've got a much more solid base. We've got a load of attackers who played with each other. We've got a good chemistry. We've got a good camaraderie. We're in like a good space. Whereas I think Bayern is coming in. Bayern would be like coming into us when we sold Luis Suarez. Like, it's just not going to be easy. Or when Steven Gerrard's left, like, obviously that was kind of Klopp. But when Suarez and sort of Sterling left, and you've got half the team, it's a lot more difficult than coming into Liverpool, whereas we've sort of built the foundations for him to succeed.
Yeah, I do. I do agree. Now, Dan, I know you're a fan of, or maybe not a fan, but you're not a slander of Thomas Tuchel, as we've discussed on previous streams. I do agree that at this moment, probably Leverkusen are overperforming, and that's kind of the reason why they are 8 points ahead. However, I do feel like something's off at Bayern this season. The dressing room is probably not in the right, let's say, headspace. What are your thoughts on Xabi Alonso and his probable move in the summer?
So we know that Xabi's not going to leave Leverkusen during the season. That's just not going to happen. But one, it's just not his character. Two, it's like, why would you leave when you're 8 points clear and you can do something that Leverkusen never been done? You're just a legend. You can go anywhere you want. But all reports from like Florian Pettenberg, who is someone you should definitely follow on Twitter if you want very reliable Bundesliga reporting. Him and Christian Falk are usually pretty good about what's going on. Falk had said that like Liverpool have wanted Ryan Gravenberch since like June. And then that finally happened. Bayern are definitely not as fun of a prospect as Liverpool. One, because like Liverpool are very much a team that's going supersonic. Bayern are very much a wounded giant that needs someone to come in and kind of steady the ship. to Bayern are a weird job because you don't actually need to come in and be like a tactical mastermind. You just need to come in and bring good vibes. They are the kind of the ultimate vibes team in Europe. If you read a lot of the reports through even Thomas Mueller's famous, speech in German where he's like, it's not about tactics, it's about playing, like we're professionals, we're internationals, we know how to play these different things, why, they're playing these things, what we need to just figure it out ourselves is that he's made a lot of people at Bayern mad. So like, Matthias de Ligt, Leon Goretzka, Joshua Kimmich, Sané. The only person that's really kind of in the steady head has been Harry Kane. He's been very professional and very great for Bayern. And it's so sad that it's just so sad that Kane's not going to win his first league when he's had such an amazing season. But Thomas Tuchel just burns anyone's head out, which is why, again, I don't think Liverpool should hire him, even though I think he would do a good job for about a year or 2 years. He'd burn everyone's head out. Bayern are definitely going to have to make a push for him, but if you look at who they're linked to, it's Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, it's Hansi Flick. They're linked with guys that are going to come in and just be vibes managers. Even if they can't get Alonso this summer, they're going to bring someone in that's just going to be like, all right, guys, we're going to feel good about ourselves. Because if we forget what Solskjaer did at United, that I think is very underrated, especially now with Ten Hag there, is that he made everyone feel a part of United in a way that was a bit cringe, a bit cheesy, but people bought into that. He was able to get the most production out of Rashford, out of Pogba, consistently, and even Martial at times. There's always gonna be a risk that Xabi Alonso doesn't choose Liverpool. I think he should. I think Alonso's people should. And if he ends up choosing Bayern or Real Madrid, even though I think it is not, I think it's the wrong choice. We all have to be willing to kind of accept that and live that, and that Liverpool are not going to be relegated to the championship if we don't have Xabi Alonso as our manager next year. I would say also, and this is kind of the one thing that you could argue that would switch Alonso from Liverpool to Bayern, is that Bayern are probably going to get Max Ehrl as their sporting director. I think it's pretty much already signed and pinned. He's taking over in June. Liverpool don't have a sporting director right now. So if there is one thing that could put him off, is the fact that Liverpool have not announced who their sporting director is. Xabi doesn't know what the next step of Liverpool are going to look like. All the reports we hear, it's going to be very data driven, which I'm sure Alonso's fine with because they're very data driven at Bayer Leverkusen. And a lot of the setup we have here at Liverpool is very similar to how they would have it in the Bundesliga. I don't think it's going to happen, but again, I can be wrong. I can be wrong. I've been wrong before in the past. Normally I've been pretty on the spot about usually what comes out of the Bundesliga, but we'll just have to wait and see. I just think that we have to understand that Liverpool could do anything they can in their power right now to try and convince Xabi to come. But if he just chooses not to come, that is completely up to him. And heck, he might even stay at Bayern another year. And we just have to, cop on for that as well and not act like the world is falling down for that situation, because we can't really do anything about it right now because he's not going to leave and Jurgen Klopp's still our manager. So I know Jen said Xabi is ours too late. I hope you're right. Jen. I really hope so. My heart tells me yes, but my brain is also there's always that chance that he could just choose Bayern or Real Madrid, because those are the teams he wants to manage: Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, and Real Sociedad. Those are the three teams he really wants to manage for his career. So yeah, no, nothing to panic about, but there's definitely a world where Xabi Alonso doesn't come to Liverpool, and it has nothing to do with ownership or squad values. It's literally just it's just right time, right opportunity, right offer, right year, right day of the week. He doesn't have to move his family, which is something we have to consider as well. And he's just I just want to do 18 months at Bayern or 2 years at Bayern and just try to win the Champions League with them.
Yeah, I think the only reason why I feel or me personally, I'm having a hard time taking Bundesliga seriously was because I'm not sure exactly which season, but recently Leipzig finished second. And then for the following season, Bayern signed their manager, their best center back in Upamecano, and their number 10. So for me, having a one-team league like that, when you just can't afford to buy the best, you can take the manager and then the best players of the runners up in the league. Sorry, I feel like for Xabi Alonso, the way I view him now is a guy who's extremely ambitious. So for me, I think he'd have a lot more of an opportunity to showcase that in Liverpool rather than at Bayern. Now, Alan, your thoughts on Xabi Alonso, on the Bayern interest, and maybe on Paul's question here as well. Is there extra pressure on a former player managing the team he played for?
Yeah, there probably is extra pressure for the to go, because you play for someone, and obviously you were a top player. You kind of sometimes come with a bit of a free pass, but at the same time that kind of adds that little bit of pressure to, like, you can't nothing wrong, but clearly you can. The whole Bayern situation, I don't really feel anything with the Bayern link with Xabi, only because I think this season he's going to win the league with Leverkusen. So he'd only really want to go to Munich to try and win the Champions League, because if he goes to win the league, he's on a hand to nothing, because you can only win it with Bayern, because you shouldn't be finishing below first, as Tuchel's finding out now. But I think, as you said, he's quite a competitive guy, and I think he will look at the Premier League and see, it's the most competitive league in the world. You've got Pep, like or later, he's probably the best manager in the world. So will he want to come and test himself against Pep, considering Pep's one of his mentors since he's his former manager? So I think that will be a challenge you'll find. Also, you find in the Premier League is Mikel Arteta, who's his childhood friend. Is that a factor that he wants to come along? But my biggest thing with Liverpool, Paul, is he won the League of Bayern as a player. He won the League of Madrid as a player. But he didn't win it at Liverpool. And he has some unfinished business with Liverpool. And I think he'll want to come to Liverpool because although, obviously, I don't know how old you guys are. Obviously, I was in my mid-20s when he left. I was heartbroken when he left Liverpool. I genuinely was heartbroken. And I know deep down he didn't want to go with all the Gareth Barry signing and the links and all that type of stuff. When he said that, he didn't want to leave. So I do think he's got some unfinished business. So I think if he had the choice now between Liverpool and Bayern, I think Liverpool would come out on top. But we can't expect to hit anything at all, because rightly so, he's got a job to do, and that's to win the title for Leverkusen. So I don't know how we even entertain the possibility that he's going to come anywhere near those all confirmed until they've won the league. So the sooner Bayern throw it even more and Leverkusen get the title, because I think there's 12 games left in the Bundesliga, and so I think they finish. I think it's the second week in May. I might be wrong. If they can have that won by mid-April, then you might hear an announcement. But if that runs towards the end, I think it could be end of the season. Possibly even maybe after the Europa League final against Liverpool, you might hear some sort of announcement. Whether it's kind of done on the old, hush-hush behind everyone, it's all done, signed and sealed, but we can't announce it, so the press aren't hassling him to put any distraction on the players, because I don't think it's the right thing to do for us as a club to try and announce something while he's busy trying to win a major trophy against a mighty opposition in Bayern.
I think that's quite a good point you made regarding the winning the league with Liverpool. I think when you look at it, Xabi Alonso has been a very successful player, and he's won a lot with the teams he's played for. But the league for Liverpool, I think, is just something different. And I think the way I see Xabi being as a player, as a human, I feel like he was extremely ambitious, and I feel like that's kind of playing into our hands now. If I were to give my thoughts on Paul's question regarding the extra pressure, I feel like it's not as much pressure as it is a good thing for us and for Xabi if he chooses to manage Liverpool, because having this relationship with the fan base now, I think gives him a lot more time to prove himself. Because if he takes Bayern, for example, if we're talking about that job, we know that if you're second in Bundesliga, you're gonna feel the pressure immediately. I feel like, I don't know about you guys, but if Xabi were to come to us and didn't even win a trophy in his first 2 seasons, I think I wouldn't be necessarily worried, as long as I see the positive signs from him, and I'd still want him to be our manager. And I feel like that's the difference between our fan base and maybe a lot of others, even in England. So I feel like it just fits so perfectly. I don't know how to phrase it differently. So hopefully, hopefully we can laugh about it in the summer before we spend so much time talking
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, if you're Shabby, you can look at like, the last young manager that went to Bayern and tried to revolutionize it, which was Nagelsmann, who was a very highly rated coach. And I know Paul said who was my head. I would actually, if Julian Nagelsmann took over Liverpool for 3 years, I actually don't think that would be a bad shout for a coach. The only problem is, one, if Nagelsmann is not doing well, like the fans would not be in love with him. Versus like Alonso. Alonso could be fifth, and everyone would still love Xabi Alonso just for like the Champions League and everything else. And he wouldn't have the pressure that Steven Gerrard would have. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Like, and I think Alan all raises good points, and I think those are all like points of why Alonso should take the job. It's just we don't know what Alonso's saying. As Lace said that like Klopp had a phone call with Xabi, and yeah, I mean Klopp's pretty much just said at this point like, yeah, Xabi's the best coach to take over for me as well. Which I don't think he would be saying that unless one, he believed it, and two, he may just be like trying to like set up everything for him to take over. But again, like we don't know. There are no secrets in football, but there's always surprises as well. So we just really won't know. What I've always said is the fact that the sporting director is more important than the manager at this point. Because I think get the sporting director right for the 10 years, that's going to determine our success rather than just like who's going to be the next manager for 5 years.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that maybe come May we'll just beat Leverkusen in the Europa League final. Everyone, Xabi then sends for us, and everyone's happy. So that's the scenario to look for maybe in the next few months. Sorry. But interesting you're mentioning the sporting director, Dan, because our next topic is regarding Team Steiden. I think that's a fairly correct pronunciation. If not, maybe the Bundesliga, maybe the German fans in the comments might add something to it. He is currently the technical director for West Ham. He signed in the summer of 2023 and is rumored that he could possibly leave in 2024 because he feels like he's not been given enough power. Now, some of his signings for West Ham, with the money that they got for Declan Rice, they signed Kudus, Edson Alvarez as a DM. They've signed James Ward-Prowse and Mavropanos, which all of them I think have been pleasant surprises, and they've not been players who were necessarily Premier League proven before, maybe except James Ward-Prowse. But still, I think all of the players that I've just listed were a lot better than we've all expected him to be, honestly. So he is rumored to be on Liverpool's list, and when he was asked about it, he said that's great to hear, flattering to hear, but I can speak at the moment, which is basically code for hopefully that happens in the summer if they're actually interested. So Carter, your thoughts on him, on his role, and on the players that I've just mentioned?
I think for someone like him, I think it was rumored we were quite interested in him when we got I can't remember his name, Schmatket or something. I can't remember how to pronounce his name. And
yep.
Yeah, and it was part of the issue was obviously Klopp and Pep Linders have a lot of say so, which is a Klopp's team. Klopp's been here long enough, for better or worse. At that point, he has sort of the reins. He can make sort of veto decisions. But I think for a new manager coming in, I think because they're both sort of starting off on a similar footing, like no one's got more leeway with the owners or a stronger relationship or more power. So I think they'd be quite interested in coming in. I think he didn't sign any of the players, obviously, this year for Leverkusen, but I think he signed like Patrick Schick for quite cheap, Pedro Hincapié. There's like a young Ivorian centre-half. He signed, I think, Frimpong. So he's got a good track record of signing sort of younger players, sort of in the mold of what we did. Like, he's also not averse to signing slightly older players, which sometimes isn't a bad thing. You look at like Milner and Matip, who sort of came in as older players for frees. So I think it'd be quite an interesting appointment. He's not afraid to sort of shop in different like leagues. He's not like some, like who is it, like Tottenham have Paratici and a lot of signings like Udogie, Syria, like the goalkeeper Syria. Obviously they've ventured into a few different ones like Mickey van der Ven, but I think it's quite good that if a sporting director's coming in and he's willing to go to South America and he's willing to go to different leagues sort of around, I think that's quite a good sign of someone who's sort of very trusted in themselves to go and find like elite talent, which is what we need.
Yeah, to be honest, when I heard names regarding this position, I wasn't necessarily excited about any of them. But now, when I saw that Steiden might be available, I know I have a mate who's a West Ham fan, and he's been talking so highly of Steiden. And 2 weeks after that, I'm reading the news and I see that Liverpool might be interested, and I'm hearing the names that he's helped Leverkusen and now West Ham sign. I do feel like that's a really good fit, and now with the players that he's brought up, I feel like some of the signings that West Ham made. I feel like it's signings that we would have made maybe under Edwards, like the signing of Kudus, who was like no one thought that he was good enough for the Premier League. That's why maybe they didn't sign him, and then we saw him at West Ham, and now he's obviously probably doubled what they've gotten him for. So, Dan, I know you also have quite um, what's knowledge on Bundesliga. So, your thoughts on Steiden and his job at West Ham so far?
Yeah, Steinen's very good. He's kind of like one of those up and coming sporting directors. Jorg Schmatke, as Carter would say. Jorg had been kind of like just a guy. He's more of an old school sporting director where he's not really out there scouting and crunching the numbers. He just has like a list of like contacts and agents that he reaches out to, which is how we were able to get Indo and even Soboslai's release clause, because it wasn't commonly known. So he used his contacts to get a bunch of Bundesliga players. I think Steiden is very likely to come to Liverpool. One, because he would have a lot more power. If there's one thing about Liverpool's structure and the ownership group have done, is that they've made it so that the sporting director, except now with Klopp obviously taking more responsibility, has a lot of responsibility, and they want him to have a lot, and they want him to essentially work with the manager to plot the long-term path of the club and a sporting direction. He's been very good. He's been at Werder Bremen. He's been at Bayer Leverkusen. He's worked at very mid-level Bundesliga teams, but have been able to extract a lot of value, which is what FSG want. They want a sporting director who can find value in the market, because that's their whole philosophy. And it's been their philosophy since 2010, is that where can we find value? Now, again, value as a term has shifting definitions. And I think we've definitely now have a more top-end value market where we try to find players that are on release clauses, or we try to find players that are potentially undervalued in the market that we can get out of, like Alexa McAllister for 35, Soboslai for 65, even Alisson Becker. We paid a world record fee, but think of the value that a world-class goalkeeper brings you. Same thing with Virgil van Dijk. He's definitely the kind of guy you need, because with a more FFP-driven world, or I guess some profit and sustainability rules in the Premier League, you need someone that can find those contacts in Europe. And actually, I think that one of the reasons they may be looking at him is that I think our strategy is going to be more buying players from Europe, or from like teams that don't play in either Copa America, or maybe even like, the AFCON, because I think we only have one player at AFCON this year, and that was Salah. When the past couple of years we had Keita, we had Mane, and we had Salah at the time as well. Yeah, Paul says Caicedo and Lavia don't look at value at the moment. No, they don't, Paul. But if they probably would have worked if we got them. So Steiden, I think, is a very real possibility to come from West Ham. I mean, they'll have to pay some compensation to West Ham, similar for Xabi Alonso. So there is going to be some money changing hands if it's not an internal hire. But we already know now that Dan Ashworth is going to Manchester United. And honestly, when it comes to sporting director, like, you don't really need a big name. You just need someone that's going to fit their system. And I think Steiden would fit very well. Also, I know David Shakespeare is asking any news on Darwin. No, there's no news on Darwin, David. I hate to break it to you. He's posting on social media, which is a good sign, but there's no news on him right now.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say as well, David. Regarding Darwin, there's no news. Tomorrow, Klopp's going to have a presser, I think, at 1:30 UK time. So we're going to probably find out more. I think the news, or maybe the signs, are encouraging anyways, because he's been posting on social media, and I feel like he wouldn't do that if you knew you weren't able to play the next few matches. Alan, your thoughts on Steiden? I'm personally really excited about him. I don't know why. I just have a good feeling. I think that his knowledge of Bundesliga now fits perfectly, especially if a certain Xabi Alonso signs for us in the summer.
Yeah, well, I have to be honest, I can't say I know that much about him until this summer, when obviously he went to West Ham. And I think with the sporting director, a lot of it always then falls down. The success falls down to what players they bring in and how the players actually develop. You know, you think back when we had Michael Edwards, I never heard of him until next minute, you know, like sort of Sané and Mane's showing up and Salah and whatever else. And you kind of just, when they're successful, you know, sometimes you'd always fall down. You have the manager's choice or that the sporting director deciding who comes in and what. I think with the sporting director, I think what we need is, I think it's the relationship between that person and the manager. Very nice. Is the relationship between the manager and the sporting director, it's got to be very harmonious and it needs to be in one. Now, many years ago when Rafa was in charge and we had Rick Parry, there tended to be a bit of a battle between them two, which never is good for the club. So whoever comes in, if this guy who's at West Ham has had any dealings with Alonso previously, which I'm guessing he has, if that relationship is good, it would make sense to try and get him in, especially if, as you say, Alonso is the one who comes in, because they've got a previous working relationship, because you want that relationship to be really, really good, because I always feel the sporting director has got to be very powerful with the owners. But at Liverpool, the manager has got to be powerful with the fans. So if you have a split, it never works, because Rick Parry at the time was popular with the owners and Rafa was adored by the fans. So it always feels uncomfortable. But it's one of those ones we'll find out in the fullness of time. But some of the players he signed, like I do like that kudos from West Ham. I think he's a cracking player. So if you can kind of get these little gems, it's like when you look at some of the signings like Brighton have made, thinking, who's he? And next minute he's a superstar. You know, so if we can get a spot after these fans and these players, but we've got quite a good youth system. You don't really want anyone blocking potential pathways for these guys. So I think you've got to get a sporting director who can come in, see what we've got, and then obviously plot where potential weaknesses might be and try and fill those gaps, shall we say. But I think the relationship between the manager and sport director is vital. We got to get that right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dan's been making this point for a while now. I think about the sporting director. So yeah, obviously, really important appointment to come in the summer, maybe even earlier. As Muse said. Now, an interesting question that I've saved from Paul, I wanted to ask you, Carter, about it is, which midfielder do you feel is the best equipped to play in a front three in an emergency? Now, obviously, that has quite a domino effect on the rest of the team. I think the first one to come to mind is probably Elliot, as he's played right wing before. I think Szoboszlai has played right wing for Hungary as well, and he's done it pretty well. May I add? I think for Leipzig as well, if I remember that correctly. I feel like my biggest worry with that is the knock-on effect that it would have on the rest of the squad. Now, I was making the point in the winner that maybe Szoboszlai could be played as a right winger if Salah goes when Salah goes to AFCON. Obviously, we now have the depth as a front three, so we didn't need to play Szoboszlai then. But what are your thoughts now? Do you feel like Elliot, Szoboszlai, and maybe an outside shot for that?
I think I probably agree with what you've kind of said, but I think if Nunez was fit, I would say Elliot, because I think sometimes our issue when you put, like, if we have Elliot, Gakpo, Diaz, I think we don't have that much pace in the front three. And I also think sometimes Gakpo doesn't really put himself in the box. Like when he came on against Brentford, there was times I was just watching, I was like, just stand on the penalty spot. Like sometimes we're passing it around and there's nobody in there. So I think if we were playing Gakpo up front, I'd rather have Szoboszlai on the right wing. But if we were playing Nunez or Jota, I think Elliot will work out. I don't know where he'll work out. Like, if it was Alonso, he could definitely play like the Florian Wirtz role. And I do think when a team like Luton, who are going to be sat defending, Salah, every game Salah doesn't have the opportunity to run onto a ball and have 30 yards of space. It doesn't happen that often, especially against someone like Luton. So I think when it's like a deep sort of block of maybe a five at the back or two fours, I think Elliot, obviously he's not as good, but he can do sort of similar things. Like he got the assist against them in the first game. He is very good coming in from those wide areas, especially like he's been much better with Gomez as a right back. And now obviously Conor Bradley will be there because Trent doesn't normally overlap as much. So I definitely think I would say Harvey or Soboslai. But I think if we had a more fit team, I'd say Harvey.
And maybe an outside shout for Joe Gomez as a false nine. I think, yeah, I've been saying, I said it on stream before, and I'm going to say it again just because I think it's the fair thing to say. In the summer, I said that we should definitely get rid of Joe Gomez because he's not Liverpool level. So now I'm obviously, I'm not going to have to eat my words up because he's been absolutely massive this season. Maybe not as a false nine, but as a right back, left back, center back, I think he's been excellent whenever we needed him. So yeah, my thoughts on Joe Gomez. Alan, what do you think about playing, or who would you play in a front three out of those midfielders that we've been talking about?
Now, it probably would be Elliot, but as Carter says, we don't have a lot of pace if we put Elliot there. I think in certain games where we're playing against teams like with a low block and we don't need to go in behind, you can use Elliot. He's a cute little player. He has good touch, good technique. It's more if we play against a team and we're trying to, the game stretched. Now, I saw a bit to Luton yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yeah, it was yesterday. Against United, and obviously United were leading, and at times it was like a basketball match. So I think if we do score first on Wednesday and then Luton come out, I'm not suggesting we go basketball with them, but there might be times where we're going to literally break. And I think in games like that, Elliot's not the best in terms of trying to run in behind someone. He's not going to really leave anyone. So whether you would want to put a Soboslai in there, obviously I know he's not going to be fit, but someone who's got the legs who can literally get up and down. I don't know, obviously, what some of the younger players would be capable of doing potentially in terms of pace-wise. I know like Key Gordon's very highly thought of. Whether you would have him going into a Salah position, especially you could try him on maybe potentially in Southampton, see what he can do in a game like that. But from the midfield, I probably would say Elliot because he looks quite cultured, especially on the right-hand side, coming on his left foot. He's got a good pass on him. And as well, to be fair to him, this season, he's got a good shot on him as well. He's had scored a couple of goals outside the box. I think Palace away comes to mind. And so he's capable of doing some damage there. So yeah, I'll probably go Elliot.
Quite the super sub, I think Elliot was this season, especially against Palace and now against Burnley as well. 2 assists, I think he got against Burnley. So yeah, I think Elliot would be my choice as well, but maybe not from the get-go, mainly because we've seen him come in so well off the bench. Okay, I think the only thing I'm grateful for at this moment regarding this, because we've just seen this comment here from Electric Dreams. I think the one thing that I'm grateful for is that at least the draw in the FA Cup has been fairly kind to us. Now we got a championship side at home. So yeah, coming in 3 days later from the EFL Cup final, I think if we had gotten any sort of difficult Premier League side, that would have been, with the amount of injuries that we now have, that would have been overkill. But good to finally have a good draw. Good to finally see how City feel like every season in the cup. So yeah, one thing that I don't want to ramble about it too much, but we've had this question from David. Now we've talked a bit about Alonso and the chances of him coming or not coming. Now, me personally, I've said it in this as soon as Klopp's announced that he's leaving. For me, it was Xabi or no one else. Now, that might be a bit fatalist of me to say, but I feel like at the moment you don't really have a lot of options. Now I don't really feel like the Zerbi is quite there at the moment. I think his Brighton side have been a bit too shaky, and I feel like honestly for me, we've also seen talk of Amorim, but that would come from the Portuguese league. We don't know, the jump from the Portuguese league to the Premier League might be a bit too big all of a sudden for Amorim. The only other manager that I had in mind was Julian Nagelsmann, but obviously we've talked about with Dan. It's been difficult for him ever since leaving that Bayern job. So Dan, I'm gonna ask you, and in as in as short form as you can, what would be your choice if Alonso wouldn't sign for us in the summer?
Honestly, I know this is a shout. I would, if you don't get Nagelsmann, I think you just sign someone like a Hansi Flick, just someone who just comes in and manages for a couple years and keeps the vibe going. Mostly from the fact that I don't really rate Hansi Flick as a coach or as a manager, but what you can see from when he was at Bayern when they won the European Cup last time, I believe it was Hansi Flick's team. It wasn't Pikes, Heikes. It was Hansi Flick. Is that he can kind of come in, keep the ship steady. You can say for like 2-3 years, you can say, all right, Hansi, you're going to get 2-3 years. And then, you're going to try and get Alonso again. And Hansi's going to essentially come in and allow like to transition. And you can sell it to Hansi. It's like, this is your transition season. You'll have backing. You'll be part of this structure. You'll be able to have say on players, but most of the power is going to be with the sporting director and the scouting network. Your Barry Hunters, your Alex Thorpe's, your youth system, and you essentially pitch it as like your job is to come in and just like is in just to set him up and coach him for a couple years, and then we try to go get Alonso because Hansi he's not a Nagelsmann where like you feel like it's a risk and a personality, but he also knows what it's like to manage big personalities at a club. Maybe not international level, but I think at a club level, Hansi Flick could do a good job.
Yeah, to me, with the options that we have available, I don't even know if I can argue with that. I mean, I'm not really a fan of Hansi Flick, but obviously we've only seen so much of him. Alan, your thoughts on I don't even know how to put it. Any other good shout you may have for the manager position?
No, I've literally got all my cards on Xavi, to be honest. I didn't. I can't think of anyone else I would have. He was a coach at Liverpool and Gary O'Neill. I don't know. I think the other thing with the Liverpool job, I think it's quite a big job for any younger person to take on. An up and coming, and like when obviously we got Rodgers a couple of years ago, he was an up and coming manager. Came in, obviously did unbelievable, nearly won the title. But overall, the Liverpool thing then did get on top of him, and unfortunately, we crumbled not long after. I don't actually know one manager out there who's got the personality to like to grab hold of Liverpool when you've got no real link to Liverpool, which is what I said before about an ex-player has got a little bit of a free hit in some ways. I generally don't know who I would pick. I think if Gerrard had stayed at Rangers and he'd obviously still been doing well there, he probably would have came. Now you can't bring him where he is. Everyone we've been linked with, whether it be Postecoglou or a De Zerbi, they've all got positives, but then they've also got a negative. And the negative basically is, and it's going to sound really sad, they're not Jurgen Klopp. And that's the thing, Liverpool fans have got to realise that no one who's coming is going to be like Jurgen. So we have to accept whoever comes is going to have the downsides, and we've got to look for the positives. It's all on Xavi for me. It really is. I'm sorry, I can't give you another better answer than that. I really can't.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that. To be honest, I feel like that was my thinking from the moment I heard Jurgen might leave. So we've seen quite a few mentions here in the comments about obviously Postecoglou and then O'Neill. Thomas Frank is actually a shout that I've discussed before. I am quite a fan of Thomas Frank. I just don't know if I'd necessarily take him at Liverpool. So I think that's, yeah, I like him, but I don't know if I would take him at Liverpool. So Carter, your thoughts on any other manager outside of Xabi Alonso? Paul Linde was very impressed with your Bundesliga knowledge. So maybe you have an outside shout from the Bundesliga.
Well, I actually thought about the guy who you just said, Thomas Frank. So I think if we look at how we're going to recruit a manager, I think in all the metrics, I think defensively, Brentford are actually really good. They have just they've scored way more goals than XG has them at. And a lot of people have put that to the goalkeeper. And in previous seasons, they've been really good. I think they had a quite a good finish the year before, and they've had loads of injuries. Offensively, they still create a lot of chances. They haven't had Tony. He's got performances out of all different types of players like Ben Rama, Watkins, Morpai, and Buemu. So he's got different types of forwards playing well, which I think is a good thing. I also think in some ways he's quite similar to Klopp in the way of like marginal gains. Like I'm not trying to disrespect him, but you guys probably remember when Klopp brought in like the surfer dude and he was like teaching them to like breathe underwater, and it's all these the throwing coach, where I think Stevie Nichols and all those type of people were like, why is he doing this? Why is he bringing this person in? Do you need a throwing coach? And the throw-ins go from like 8 meters to 24 meters or something. And I think when you look at the amount of smart set pieces Brentford score in the Premier League, like the one against City, they've had good performances against us. But I think to the relegation battle, he's had his left back out the whole season. He's had his right back out the whole season. He's had most of his centre backs out the whole season. He's had a new goalkeeper come in, underperform. He's had his best striker out the whole year. He's had his best winger out after about 8 games. His other players went to AFCON and he's still above the relegation zone with really good underlying numbers. And also, I've actually had the privilege to meet him, and he spoke at like an event I was at, and very charismatic, very Klopp-esque. He was on like a panel, and just the way he interacted with everyone. Like someone like Nagelsmann's quite not nerdy, but quite like he comes across not as like a man of the people, whereas Thomas Frank seems like quite a relatable person who's quite normal, down to earth, like sort of the normal one type of vibe. And that's why I think someone like him, I think it would be difficult for a lot of fans to take, because even me, I'd be like, oof, I think the issue is stepping up to those type of players. Like, I don't think he's not gonna be attracting a Rafael Leao or a Florian Wirtz, but I think players in the Premier League will respect him. I think all the players that played against Brentford will go there. A really well-coached team. They're organised. They're effective. So I think he's my shout, to be honest. I like the idea of Amarin, but I have maybe seen 2 games, so I can't comment on him.
Yeah, and I think another thing that I loved about his Brentford side was, I remember I've been a fan ever since Brentford were in the Championship. They've lost a playoff final against Fulham, and then in
Yeah.
that summer they've lost Watkins and then Ben Rama, who was, these two were their best players. You know, the top scorer and the top assister in the squad. The next season they've won like automatic promotion. They were, I think, in second or something like that. So the fact that they were able to come in to the Premier League, or yeah, I think, or maybe in the playoffs still. Well, anyway,
Playoffs. I think it was playoffs.
they got promoted the next season after missing out on a promotion final, playoff final. So I think that kind of shows you the mentality of the team that he's gotten over there. I think for me, it reminds me a lot of how I felt when Klopp took over. And I remember missing that league title in 2018-19 when we lost it with 97 points, I think it was. I remember thinking, when are we going to get a chance like that ever? Will we ever get a chance like that ever again? And then the next season, we literally win 26 out of the first 27 matches. So, yeah, I think for Thomas Frank definitely deserves to be into this conversation because he's done great things at Brentford as well. So with that one, I think we're going to leave it there for this evening. Thank you very much to everyone who left their comments, who left, who subscribed to the channel, liked the video, and of course, who were part of the conversation. Thank you very much to Carter, to Dan, to Alan. You'll never walk alone, Jay. Up the Reds, and see you tomorrow, 7:30 UK time.